My name is Jenna Park. I'm 31 years old and I haven't been to a family gathering in nearly 3 years. Not because I'm angry, not because I hate them, but because every time I walk into a room with my family in it, I feel like I'm shrinking. Like I have to apologize for who I am before anyone even says hello. My parents are Korean immigrants who built a chain of dental clinics from scratch here in Los Angeles. They came with nothing and made everything. It's the kind of story people love to romanticize. Rags to riches, American dream stuff. But behind closed doors, it came with a price. Everything had to look perfect. Always. And if you didn't fit that picture, you got cropped out. I'm the youngest of 3. My oldest brother, Daniel, is a pediatric surgeon with a house in Brentwood and a wife who looks like she walked out of a K-drama. My middle brother, Justin, is an orthodontist who just bought a Tesla for his 4-year-old son to drive when he turned 16. I wish I were exaggerating. Then there's me, the dropout. The one who left med school halfway through second year because I was tired of pretending I didn't want to scream every time I put on a white coat. I wanted to tell stories, real stories. So I became a documentary filmmaker. I lived on ramen and freelance gigs for years. Eventually, I carved out a space. Small, but mine. But none of that mattered to my family. In their eyes, I'd thrown away everything they sacrificed to give me. "You want to be poor?" my mom said once. "Then at least don't bring shame to this house." So I stopped bringing myself at all. What they also don't know, and what I've never corrected, is that I haven't been doing this alone. For the past 5 years, I've lived with my partner, Malik. He's a former foster kid who put himself through school, started a nonprofit for youth housing, and somehow still finds time to make me laugh when I think I can't breathe. But to my family, he's invisible. Because he's Black. Because he's not a doctor. Because he didn't come with a pedigree, a BMW, and a family crest. I didn't tell them about him. I didn't invite him to birthdays or holidays. I kept him separate like a dirty secret. And it killed me a little every time. But I thought I was protecting us. From their judgment. From their words that slice with a smile. Then, last week, my mom called. "We're having a dinner at the house. Big night. New investors flying in from Seoul. Daniel's doing a presentation and we want the whole family there. But Jenna..." Her voice changed. Low, syrupy. "Please don't bring anyone. It's not the right time." I asked her point blank. "You mean Malik?" There was silence. Then, "I just don't want to confuse people. He might feel out of place." I said, "Thanks for being honest," and hung up. But that night, I sat on our couch, curled up next to Malik, and something broke. Not in a sad, tragic way. More like a wire snapping that had been pulled too tight for too long. "I think I want to go," I told him. He looked at me, surprised. "Really?" "And I want you to come with me." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Only if you're ready for what that means." I was. I'm tired of hiding the person who makes me feel safe in a world that constantly tells me I don't belong. I'm tired of shrinking myself so my family can stay comfortable in their bubble. But I also had a plan. If they wanted to pretend I was the failure daughter, the one who teaches little kids art, or whatever lie my mom's been spreading, I'd let them. Until they found out what I'd really been building. Because what they didn't know, what no one at that dinner would know, is that my last film had just won Best Social Impact Documentary at SXSW, that I'd signed a production deal with Netflix, that Malik's nonprofit had merged with a national youth housing initiative, and together we'd launched a program that was being covered by NPR. So, no, I wasn't coming to beg for approval. I was coming to see if they could still look me in the eye once they realized I never needed it. The night of the dinner, I wore a navy blue dress I'd thrifted in Echo Park. It had a small tear in the lining I stitched up myself. Nothing flashy, but it fit me. Like, really fit me. Not just my body, but who I've become. Malik wore a charcoal button-up and slacks. Clean, understated. We didn't need to shout to be seen. We pulled up to my parents' house, a sprawling, sterile white structure with the kind of lighting that screams, We paid someone to design this. The driveway was already packed with Teslas and Range Rovers. A valet, yes, they hired a valet for a dinner at their home, opened my door. The second we stepped into the foyer, I could feel it. The shift in air. My mom's eyes locked on Malik, then flicked to me like I'd done something obscene. My dad barely nodded. And Daniel? He was already holding court in the living room with his investment slides up on the 90-inch TV, a scotch in hand like he was running Shark Tank out of the den. "Jenna, so glad you could make it," my mom said through a tight-lipped smile. "And Malik, right?" He smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am. Nice to meet you." She didn't respond, just turned toward the dining room. "Everyone's already seated. We'll bring out the food shortly." I hadn't been in that house in 2 years, but it felt like a decade. Everything had been redecorated in whites and grays. No warmth, no personality, just the aesthetic of someone trying to impress people who don't live there. As we walked in, the seating chart became very obvious. There was a long, formal table. One seat at the far end was empty. Next to it, a small round side table with 2 place settings. My place. "Seriously?" I muttered. A few heads turned. My dad gave me a small shrug like, "What can you do?" Like I should be grateful to even be invited. Malik glanced at me but didn't say anything. He pulled out the chair for me at the little side table. I sat down slowly, pretending like I didn't feel the heat in my cheeks or the knot in my throat. People at the main table talked around us, through us. My mom introduced Daniel's wife, Mia, as a future Harvard law grad and soon-to-be mommy. My other brother, Justin, wasn't even there. He was traveling for business, aka avoiding family stuff as usual. One woman leaned toward my mom and asked, "And your daughter, Jenna? What field is she in again?" Before I could open my mouth, my mom answered, "She teaches art to underprivileged kids. It's sweet, a passion project." Malik looked at me. My jaw clenched. I smiled politely at the woman and said, "I make films. Documentaries, actually." "Oh," she replied, clearly caught off guard. "Like, for YouTube?" "Actually, one just screened at South by Southwest," Malik added casually, taking a sip of water. A pause. Then the woman changed the subject back to Daniel and his medical investments in pediatrics. I sat there chewing lettuce and resentment. That's when it happened. Across the table, a woman I hadn't noticed earlier turned her head toward me. She looked to be in her 60s, short gray bob, dark plum lipstick, the kind of style that said old money but artsy. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait, are you Jenna Park?" she asked. I looked up, surprised. Yes?" She broke into a wide smile. "I thought you looked familiar. I saw your documentary, Lines in the Dust, at the Civic Impact Forum last fall. You made that?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that was mine." She turned to my mom, visibly delighted. "That film had our entire board in tears. I've never seen a more honest portrait of housing insecurity. We used it in our spring fundraiser. It helped us raise almost $500,000 in pledges." My mom froze, wine glass midair. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again, and suddenly the table was paying attention. The woman continued, "You did extraordinary work. I hope you're still making films." "I am," I said. "Actually just signed a deal with a major platform." Malik jumped in. She doesn't like to brag. I could feel the room recalibrating. Daniel cleared his throat. "I think I heard about that one. The one with the unhoused mother and the community garden, right?" "That's the one." The woman beamed. "Brilliant use of narrative structure. I teach storytelling theory at UCLA, and I use that segment in class." You could hear the forks pause mid-plate. Malik reached under the table and gave my knee a small squeeze. I looked across the room and caught my dad's expression. Not pride, not warmth, just confusion. Like he was realizing his youngest daughter had a whole world he knew nothing about. And maybe that scared him more than it impressed him. I didn't say anything. I just sat up straighter, reached for my water, and let the silence do the work. I barely finished my salad before my mom's heels were clicking toward me. "Jenna," she said, her voice sharp but low, like she was trying to smile with her teeth and scream with her eyes at the same time. "Can I talk to you for a moment, in the kitchen?" Malik gave me a glance that asked, "You good?" I nodded once. The kitchen was spotless, of course. All white marble and brushed gold fixtures, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. It smelled like lavender hand soap and pressure. My mom stood by the island, arms crossed. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean. You come here after all this time with him." She snapped her fingers toward the dining room. "And suddenly you're letting people fawn over you like you're some big success?" I blinked. I didn't let anyone do anything. Someone recognized my work. I didn't stage a press conference in the foyer. She laughed under her breath. Not the good kind. "This is supposed to be your brother's night. He's presenting his investment portfolio to potential partners. Important people, Jenna. Not documentary watchers." I let that sit for a second. "You mean not people who care about anything outside of their zip code?" Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you always trying to make us look bad?" That stopped me cold. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And all I saw was a woman trying so hard to hold together the version of life she thought mattered. Every dish curated. Every smile measured. Every person at that table handpicked to affirm a narrative she'd been rehearsing for decades. "I'm not trying to make you look bad, Mom. You're just mad I'm not playing along." "You humiliated me," she whispered. "No, Mom. You humiliated yourself the moment you introduced me as a teacher, instead of just asking me how I've been." She didn't reply. Her jaw tensed like she wanted to say something that would end the conversation completely, but for once she didn't. She just stared at me like I was a stranger who spoke her language with the wrong accent. "I didn't come here to prove anything," I said, quieter now. "I just wanted to stop hiding. Malik is part of my life. My work is part of my life. I'm not going to keep shrinking just so you can breathe easier in front of people who don't actually care about us." She closed her eyes. "You don't get it. You never did." "No," I said. "I just finally stopped pretending I did." The door creaked behind us. I turned. It was Daniel. "Everything okay?" he asked, a little too smoothly, like he'd been listening but wanted to act like he hadn't. "We're fine," Mom said quickly. Daniel's eyes flicked between us. "You should come back out. People are asking about you." I followed him into the hallway. As we walked, he leaned in and said, "You really blindsided her tonight." "Wasn't trying to." "I know," he said, but I could tell he didn't mean it as a compliment. "You could have warned her, or at least toned it down." "I didn't plan any of that, Daniel." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "This family doesn't do well with surprises, you know that. I think that's the problem." When we stepped back into the dining room, the conversation had shifted. The woman who recognized me, Dr. Irene Chen, I later learned, was now deep in conversation with Malik. My dad was watching them, eyes narrowed, brow furrowed. I knew that face. It was the same look he had when a patient's x-rays didn't match their symptoms. Something wasn't adding up. I sat back down at our little table. Malik leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure. I was equal parts proud and cracked open. "They're not going to clap," I said quietly. "They're not going to say, 'Wow, Jenna, we were wrong.' I don't think that's ever coming." "Good thing you didn't need it," he said, smiling at me like I was the bravest person in the room. The rest of the dinner felt like a blur. Clinking forks, polite applause for Daniel's speech, dessert that tasted like cardboard no matter how fancy it looked. But something shifted by the time coffee was served. Dr. Chen stood up, raised a glass, and toasted me. She didn't ask permission. She didn't soften it with qualifiers. She just said, "The most important work happening in this room tonight is being done by someone at the kids' table. And that says more about the world we've built than we'd like to admit." Dead silence. Then one of the guests, Someone from a nonprofit, I think. Clapped. Then another. My mom didn't. My dad didn't. But I didn't look at them. I looked at Malik, and I smiled. I didn't expect an ovation. I didn't expect my mom to stand and cheer, or Daniel to apologize for years of backhanded compliments. But I guess a small, quiet part of me hoped my dad might at least meet my eyes, acknowledge that I'd become something, that I was something. Instead, he sipped his espresso like none of it had happened. Like his daughter hadn't just been publicly validated in front of his investors. Like I was still the awkward, artsy kid he wasn't quite sure what to do with. After dessert, people started filtering out. Some said polite goodbyes, some pretended they didn't see me. Classic. Malik helped a couple folks find their coats. He's always been better with strangers than I am. Meanwhile, my dad stood near the patio doors, staring out into the yard like it might give him better answers than the room full of people behind him. I walked over. "Can we talk?" I asked. He glanced at me, then wordlessly slid the glass door open and stepped outside. The backyard was pristine. Of course it was. All hedges and string lights and a gas fire pit that probably cost more than my entire apartment setup. But it was quiet out there. Cooler, too. You could actually think. We stood there for a moment, neither of us speaking. Then I said it. Low, even. "You didn't say a word." Still nothing. I turned toward him. "You didn't clap. You didn't smile. You didn't even look surprised." He didn't look at me. I didn't know what to say. "Try starting with, 'I'm proud of you.'" He exhaled through his nose like I'd asked him to say something embarrassing in public. "Jenna, this wasn't the time." "For who?" "For Daniel and his slideshow about dental implants." He shot me a look, sharp and immediate. "He's worked hard to build something real, something that supports a family, that has structure." My turn to exhale. "You think I haven't built something real?" "I think," he said slowly, "you've built something that I don't understand." I crossed my arms. "Then maybe ask. Maybe listen. Maybe show even a fraction of the support you give to your other kids." "You think I don't support you because I didn't clap?" He snapped, finally turning to face me. "Jenna, I let you do what you wanted. I didn't stop you." My mouth went dry. "You let me?" He paused. "I didn't need permission, Dad. I needed you to care. I needed you to show up when I screened my first short at the community center. I needed you to ask me if I was okay when I moved out with nothing but a Craigslist futon and a camera bag. You call that support?" He looked down, then away. "I didn't know how to help you. You could have started by not making me feel like a disappointment every time I walked in the door." The silence between us thickened, like fog, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy. Finally, he said, "You weren't a disappointment. You were just unpredictable, and I didn't want you to fail." "I didn't," I said, staring at him. "You just didn't notice." We stood there in it for a while. That big, raw, ugly truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. He didn't trust that I'd turn out okay unless I followed the blueprint. His blueprint. "When I was a kid," I said, voice quieter now, "you used to fix everything. My science fair volcano exploded. You rebuilt it overnight. I crashed Mom's Camry into the mailbox. You patched it up before she got home. But somewhere along the way, when it came to me, you stopped trying. You didn't fix the way people in this family talk down to me. You didn't stand up for me at dinner. You just let it happen." He didn't respond. "That's what hurt," I added. "Not your silence, your permission." He finally sat down on one of the outdoor chairs. He looked older all of a sudden. Not sick. Not frail. Just tired. Like a man who realized too late that he'd misread the map. "You remind me of my mother," he said after a long pause. "She was stubborn like you. Didn't care what anyone thought. She wanted to be a painter. My grandfather wouldn't let her. Said it was childish. She stopped. Never picked up a brush again. I sat beside him, surprised. She used to say, "Being good at something doesn't matter if it embarrasses the people you love," he continued. I always hated that sentence, but I didn't realize how much of it I carried with me. I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't, so I just said, "I'm not ashamed of what I've built." "You shouldn't be," he said quietly. It wasn't a full apology, not really, but it was the closest I'd ever gotten from him. And maybe in that moment, it was enough. When we finally walked back inside, the dining room had cleared. My mom was pretending to organize the wine glasses, probably to avoid having to speak to me again. Malik looked up from the hallway and met my eyes. I smiled at him, and for the first time that night, it wasn't out of defense. It was real. Because even if nothing changed, I had. A few weeks after the dinner, I sent out an email. Just one line. "If you ever want to see what I really do, what I've built with my own hands and heart, come by the office this Friday." No pressure. Just an open door. I sent it to my mom, my dad, and both my brothers. No attachments, no links to my films, just the address and an invitation to see for themselves. Friday came and I almost canceled. But Malik made coffee and sat beside me on the worn couch in our tiny shared office space. The same couch we thrifted together after moving in, the one with the crooked leg we never bothered to fix. And he said, "If they come, cool. If they don't, also cool. You're not the one with something to prove." At 3 p.m., the door opened. It wasn't my mom. It was Daniel. He walked in like he wasn't sure if he'd made the wrong turn, wearing a Patagonia vest and that look he always wore when he was outside a hospital. "Hey," he said. "This is it?" "This is it," I said, smiling. I showed him around. Nothing flashy. Just a few edit bays, a wall of storyboards, and a pinboard full of photos from the schools and shelters we'd filmed in. He paused longest at one particular image. A boy sitting cross-legged on a cracked sidewalk, headphones too big for his head, eyes closed, lost in a documentary we'd screened from a mobile projector. "Kids watching your work?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, he's in one of our literacy programs now. First book he finished was The Giver." Daniel nodded slowly. "We didn't know." "I know." He cleared his throat. "Mom's embarrassed, won't admit it. But I think she's realizing she missed a few things." "She didn't miss them," I said. "She just refused to look." He didn't argue. "Justin said he might swing by next week," he added. "Don't hold your breath." I laughed. Wouldn't dream of it. Before he left, he pulled something from his jacket. It was an envelope. "For the next project," he said. "From me. Not Dad, not the family, just me." I opened it after he left. It wasn't money. It was a letter. Handwritten. "I used to think you walked away from the family. Now I see you just walk toward something else. I hope one day I can be that brave." As for my mom, she didn't come. But the fallout from that night came to her anyway. Apparently, one of her prized investment partners at the dinner, the one she'd bragged to about Daniel's financial future, had been quietly investigated by the Department of Justice. Real estate fraud. He'd name-dropped my dad and mom as part of his network. When the story broke, her country club whispers turned into stares. Some board she served on dropped her within the week. She called me 2 days later. "You set me up," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "I warned you. You didn't want to listen." She hung up. That was the last time we spoke directly. A few emails came later. Cordial, stiff, signed regards, Mom. I didn't block her, but I stopped waiting for her to be someone she's never been. As for Dad, he sent me a photo last month. He was painting. Oil on canvas. The subject? A little girl sitting at a table full of adults, sketching alone with a crayon. The caption read, "You always saw what we missed." Sometimes healing doesn't look like reunion. Sometimes it looks like distance that finally makes sense. Like choosing your own peace over someone else's expectations. I've learned that dignity isn't about applause. It's about not needing to explain your worth in rooms that refuse to see it. It's about choosing clarity over closeness when the cost of being understood is too high. If you've ever stood alone at a table full of people who claimed to love you but only loved their version of you, I see you. And you're not crazy. Thanks for listening to my story. If anything I shared tonight hits close to home, I'd love to hear yours in the comments. Sometimes sharing isn't about closure, it's about connection. And if you want to stick around for more stories like this, feel free to subscribe. No pressure. The door is open.